Let me say that Senate Bill 5 is a case of haste makes waste. The problem that we have is that this bill went from introduction to passage in only 3 weeks, a 294-page bill. It passed by a very narrow vote of 17 to 16, with all Senate Democrats and 6 Senate Republicans voting no. Now the bill moves to the Ohio House, where we can only hope they be more respectful of the rights, in particular, of our first responders and our police and fire. I will give you 3 reasons why I voted against the bill. The first one is that under this bill, and I'm quoting from the bill, it is an unfair labor practice for public employees to communicate or attempt to engage in other direct dealings during the period of negotiations with elected officials or appointed officials of the public employer regarding wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment, or with regard to matters that are or may become the subject of collective negotiations. To me, that is a complete violation of the First Amendment. I don't know why public employees forfeit their right to speak to their elected officials. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's frightening that anyone would even propose such language, and I don't want to have our first responders threatened with unfair labor practices merely because they run into their city councilman at a grocery store and say, hey, I'd really like you to look into some safety equipment that we need on the force. As I said on the floor, it used to be said that you can't fight City Hall. Well, under this bill, you can't even talk to City Hall. And I think that's a bad mistake. The second thing is that this bill takes away from firefighters and police officers the right to negotiate over staffing levels and safety equipment. And while I think that most public employers would do the right thing by our police and fire, I think there are some public employers who want to spend money on their favorite pork barrel projects who would instead devote the money to those pork barrel projects and leave our firefighters at risk with 2 men on a truck or with inadequate safety equipment. And therefore, I believe very strongly that police and fire must have the right to negotiate staffing levels and safety equipment. And third, and perhaps most disturbingly, what this bill does is it takes away binding arbitration as a means of resolving labor disputes. It continues and extends the prohibition against strikes to all public employees. No one can strike. And it replaces that with what I call the heads I win, tails you lose proposition. What do I mean by that? Under this bill, if you negotiate, if you go to fact-finding, if you mediate, and you still do not have an agreement, the legislative body of the city council or the county commission or the township trustees gets to pick between the union's last offer to management or management's last offer to the union. Well, what do you think they're going to take? The same legislative body that has told you no through negotiations, fact-finding, and mediation, they suddenly going to adopt your position? I don't think so. This is a mockery. There is no independent, elected or unelected, neutral party that will get to resolve the dispute. And it seems to me that that's fundamentally flawed. Not only is it flawed, but once management makes the decision, you can be stuck with a 3-year contract, and the union must sign the 3-year contract on the terms selected by management. I think that is a recipe for labor unrest. I think it fails the smell test. I think we need to be looking for some alternate way of having a truly independent, neutral, with no dog in the fight to resolve that small number of cases where the union and the management cannot come to terms on a satisfactory agreement. So for those reasons and many more, I chose to buck my party. I chose to buck my roommate president, who removed me from the committee. And I said, I'm sorry, I just cannot do this. I believe that we are making a grievous mistake. I believe in Ohio, some collective bargaining reforms are certainly needed, but this goes too far. And for that reason, I'm continuing the fight by telling my House Republican friends, you got to fix this bill. It is simply fundamentally flawed.